Hey guys, lesson 8 is what we're going to be covering today. So that's on page 44, so down here, page 44. But we're actually not going to do page 44. We're not going to start with that one. We're going to skip to 45. So it says example 2 at the top, and it has this diagram already in your book. So we're going to use the number line to model shown to explain and write the opposite of 2 2/5 as a sum of two rational numbers. So basically what they're trying to get you to understand is that you can add and subtract rational numbers, so fractions or decimals, by breaking those pieces apart and looking at the whole number involved and the part of that number involved. So basically, they took 2 2/5 and they broke it apart, and they want you to think about it like this. They want you to think about that number as being 2, the whole part of the number, and 2/5, the fraction part of the number. But what they want you to also understand is that when you break that apart, you can find the opposite of simply that part. So for example, I can take 2 2/5, and the opposite of 2 is -2. The opposite of 2 is -2. And the opposite of 2/5 is -2/5. So when we go to add and subtract these numbers, it sometimes is a more logical way for us to think by finding the parts and pieces separately and then kind of combining them back together at the end. So in this diagram, they are showing you that 2 2/5 is the opposite of -2 2/5. So this is a little bit lighter gray in your book, the right-hand side, the positive side, 2 and then 2/5. So see how they broke this up? They gave you 2, and then they gave you 2/5. And they did the same on this other side, but using the opposite. So this is -2, and this is -2/5. So they broke that up. So sometimes it's easier to do that by thinking about them separately, basically. Okay, so it says at the bottom here, the opposite of a sum, the top single arrow pointing left, and the sum of the opposites correspond to the same point on the number line. So the opposite of 2/5, I'm going to go over here and write this. The opposite of 2 2/5 is -2 2/5. Which that should probably not be a surprise to you since we've been talking about opposites quite a bit. And it's just the negative or positive version of the other number, so in the opposite direction. Okay, so what they would like you to do in this part, exercise 2, is they want us to rewrite each mixed number as the sum of the two signed numbers. So I'm going to do A for you as an example so you understand what they're talking about. They want us to separate these. So -9 and 5/8. They want us to realize that this is -9 and this is -5/8, and they're just adding them together. They're adding the two parts together. So you do that with B and C. So pause the video here, go do B and C, and then come back and check your answer. So this is -2, and this is -1/2, and they just want us to add those parts together. And then same for this one, except it's positive already. So this is 8, this is 11/12, and just add them up. Done. So now we're doing the opposite of that in exercise 3 at the bottom of that page. Represent each sum as a mixed number. So now we need to look at what we have and just put them together. So again, I'll do the first one for you. So this is -1, and this is -5/12. So together, this is -1 and 5/12. So we're just doing the opposite. Instead of breaking them apart like we did in this section, we're putting them back together. So you go do a B and C on your own, and come back and check your work. So B is 30 and 1/8, sorry. and C is negative 17 and 1/9. Just add them up. Put them back together. Okay, page 46 is a word problem. Mr. Mitchell lost 10 pounds over the summer. Loss is a key word here. That's going to tell me it's negative 10. And by jogging each week. By winter, he gained, that's a key word. That means positive, 5 1/8 pounds. Represent the situation with an expression involving signed numbers. What is the overall change in Mr. Mitchell's weight? So there's two parts here. We have to represent the situation. So basically, we need to write an equation. And then we need to answer the question, what's his overall change in weight? Okay, so equation first. So negative 10 plus 5 1/8. So he lost 10 pounds and then he gained 5 1/8 back. So how you want to think about this is to separate these. So I'm going to ignore the fraction for a second and I'm going to think about negative 10 plus 5 first. And I'm going to say to myself, negative 10 plus 5 is negative 5. Technically, I still have the 1/8 here, yes? And so now I'm going to think about negative 5 plus 1/8. And I'm going to say to myself, well, they're opposites. Negative 5 and 1/8 are, one's negative, one's positive, so I'm going to subtract them. And so if I split one of the whole numbers of 5 up into 8 parts, there are 7/8 of them left. And I took one of these away. So think about the number 5, right? So the number 5 can be rewritten as 4 plus 8/8. That's still 5. 4 plus 8/8 is still 5, except now I rewrote one of the parts as a fraction because that's what this other part is, 1/8. That's also a fraction. So if I subtract them, if I take 1/8 away from this, I have 7/8. But now I've got the correct whole number to go with it. And I need to take the sign of the bigger number or the larger absolute value. So this is my larger absolute value, the negative. So negative 4 and 7/8 is my final answer. So what does that mean? It means that he still had a small weight loss of 4 pounds, 4 and 7/8 of a pound. If he's smart, he'll just round it to 5 and say he lost 5 pounds. Okay, so exercise 5. Jamal is completing a math problem and represents the expression negative 5 5/7, ooh, I can't talk today, plus 8 minus 3 2/7 with a single rational number as shown in the steps below. Justify each of Jamal's steps, then show another way to solve the problem. Okay, so the first step, let's see, what did he do differently? This looks the same, plus 8 looks the same as the problem. Oh, here's the difference. This is the difference. So all he did was he rewrote this to be addition. Instead of it being subtract 3 2/7, he made it plus negative 3 2/7. Okay, so that's nothing big, right? Then, let's see, what's the difference between this line to this line? Oh, it looks like he rearranged things a little bit, right? So he's putting the negative 5 5/7 and the negative 3 2/7 next to each other. That's actually pretty smart. First of all, he's combining the negatives, but he's also combining the terms that have fractions, so that'll be really good. So what property he's using is actually the commutative property. Remember, it doesn't matter what order you add things in, just as long as you take care of all of them. So commutative property. Remember, that's with a T, not an N. Okay, wow, things look like he got a little crazy here. So he split up, look, so he split the 5 and the 5/7, and then he split the 3 and the 2/7 up. Okay. All right, so the opposite of a sum is the sum of its opposites. So basically he just used that rule that we did. He was able to break things up, and the rule is that it's the sum of its opposites. I'm not going to expect you to know that that's the name of the rule. I just expect you to know how it works. And then he did a little bit of rearranging again by bringing the fractions closer to each other in their problem. So he used the commutative property again by rearranging. Anytime you rearrange, that's the commutative property. And now he's finally getting into doing some of the simplification here. So he took -5/7 and -2/7 and turned them into -1. So, -5/7 and -2/7. That's really -7/7. That's where he got the -1 from. Okay, so really he's just simplifying now. And then I think he's just going to continue to simplify all the way down, it looks like. So he took -5 and -1 and made them -6, and then he took -6 and -3, made them -9, and then finally he did -9 plus 8 and got -1. So yeah, it's just simplifying from there on out. He's just adding and subtracting his integers the way that he's supposed to. But all of that looks pretty good. Part of the question asks us to show another way to solve the problem. I'm not going to ask you to do that since I'm not here to double check everything, so you get to skip that part for today. All right, so on to the problem set. These are the ones that I would like for you to do. Definitely number 1. I'm going to have you skip number 2 since number 1 kind of takes care of that for us. And I'm going to have you go down to these word problems. Number 6 I like. Let's see if there's any other ones that are really good. And I'm going to have you do number 8. 1, 6, and 8. And then 9 on the back. Is 9 a good one? Nah, that's okay. So just 1, 6, and 8 for today. Make sure that that's done. Because when I get back on Thursday, you're going to turn all of this stuff in. So you're going to turn in the problem set from lesson 7 that I had you do yesterday. And you're going to turn in lesson 8. And then tomorrow, I'm going to do lesson 9 for you, and you're going to have to turn in that problem set too. Okay? All right, so be good for the sub, and email me or message me on Google Classroom if you have any issues. Bye, guys.